We all outgrow things. Sometimes we outgrow snacks or clothes or music. Sometimes we outgrow people or places or thoughts. But more than anything, we outgrow art. We outgrow the books that change the way we think. We outgrow the music that could always change our mood. And we outgrow the movies that taught us the things we value. A lot of teenage and early adult life is about that evolution, about defining and redefining your tastes. And because of that, a lot of the stuff you fall in love with can feel embarrassing in retrospect. But deep down, I think you always hold a special place for it in your heart, even if it's against your better judgment. Because nostalgia is a powerful thing, and nobody knows that better than Doug Walker. Like a lot of people, I discovered Doug and the character of the nostalgia critic in high school. I actually started watching re-uploads of his old videos a few months before his hiatus ended in 2013. At that time, I was in that stage of film bro development where negativity reigned supreme and watching strangers rip apart bad movies was the best pastime I could think of. And Doug's videos just struck a very particular chord with teenage me. They were structured well, they worked on repeat viewings, plus I was 14, so I still found his jokes funny. Over the last few years of high school, I slowly fell off watching him as I found new creators I preferred, but I always had a positive memory of him lingering in the back of my mind. There's a name for that feeling. What is it? Doug started out like most of us do, alone on YouTube, but after copyright issues forced him off in 2008, he formed a website of his own, thatguywiththeglasses.com, later rebranded as Channel Awesome. From there, he started recruiting other internet reviewers to the site, building up a stable of producers that didn't have to worry about YouTube's copyright system, a dream we all share. And the more engrossed I became in internet movie culture through high school, the more I saw that Channel Awesome had a certain prestige to it in the review community. Being selected by them was a huge deal, and I'm sure that joining the site was the goal for a lot of producers who started making reviews because Doug's style was undeniably influential. And to celebrate the second, third, and fourth anniversaries of the website, Doug assembled as many producers as he could to make their very own movies. And the results were very embarrassing. To be fair, I remember enjoying these movies a lot when I first watched them, but I think a lot of that goodwill was just from the novelty of seeing all these producers together and also being 14. Or maybe it just speaks to how little I knew about filmmaking then, because man, these movies are awful. Not just terribly written, poorly acted, or amateurishly shot, although never less than all three, this unholy trilogy still lingers in my mind to this day. Maybe it lingers out of curiosity as to how I ever enjoyed something so awful, or as a cautionary tale of how not to make movies. Either way, since so many years have gone by since my last viewing of this trilogy, I wanted to revisit it with fresh eyes, to see if there was anything new to discover. And if films give us insight to their creators, then I learned a lot about Doug Walker. So, let's start where this whole nightmare started, with Kickassia. I think Kickassia is the best of these three movies, if only because it's the shortest and the least offensive. And I don't mean offensive in terms of content, I mean more in terms of what it asks its audience to accept as entertainment. The plot is that there's a small piece of land in Nevada called Molossia, and the nostalgia critic assembles his fellow reviewers to invade and take over. After an epic After Effects-fueled battle, they manage to take control, placing the critic in charge as their leader and renaming the micronation Kickassia. But as the critic goes mad with power, they eventually fall to infighting and are forced to leave Molossia and return to their normal lives. And that's about all there is to it. Kickassia doesn't really have much in the way of an actual story, so much as things continue to happen until it hits 90 minutes. It feels less like an actual movie and more like a skit that would go on during an old nostalgia critic video, just stretched out to feature length. In terms of feeling stretched, a recurring problem in this movie is the way conversations are structured, because apparently everyone had to contribute a line to every bit, so the jokes just go on and on and on until you pray for them to stop. The best and most painful example of this is the reporter interviewing various reviewers about their roles in the newly established government, where everyone gets a joke that goes on for what feels like 5 minutes apiece. Did fans get a kick out of that in 2010? Probably. But does it hold up? God, no. There are moments where story beats kind of happen, but the focus of the movie is more on getting to the next joke as quickly as possible, or as slowly as possible. And that's very much the Achilles heel of this movie. The early internet energy it gives off makes it awkward to watch. It's a very uncomfortable time capsule. It's so loud and obnoxious, everyone is always shouting and screaming. I think a lot of that is Doug Walker's influence because his default joke is screaming, but this movie really could have used some breathing room. When I watch it, I just think about early Smosh and Shane Dawson and the garbage I used to watch, and then I think about how long ago that was, and how old I feel, and how my leg keeps hurting, and how I'm lactose intolerant now, and where did my hairline go? Anyway, it never feels like they're really trying with Kickassia. It's just a bunch of people screwing around and doing dumb bits for an hour and a half, and then there's another After Effects battle, and it just kind of ends. There's never any big twists or surprising turns, it just kind of goes joke to joke until it's over, and the final line of the movie even acknowledges what a waste of time it all was.
Did they not learn as conquerors once before that all is fair in love and war? No.
Ultimately, for such a ridiculous concept and such a casual execution, I'd say it works. It's watchable. For the most part. It's not exactly impressive on a filmmaking level. From the first few shots, you can tell how cheaply and quickly it was filmed, but again, since it rarely feels like it's trying to be a quote-unquote real movie, that's easy to forgive. Also, this was made by a bunch of internet personalities in 2010 in the desert with one camcorder. It's not gonna look like Roger Deakins shot it, but you'd think after watching so many terrible movies, Doug Walker would try to make his movies not look like them. Or maybe he's watched so many bad movies that he can't emulate anything else. Maybe that's why the stuff he's making in 2020 looks like this. This movie's greatest strength, which is assembling all of these personalities in one place, is also its greatest weakness in a way, because they weren't all equally popular. The nostalgia critic was very much the driving force of Channel Awesome, and there was never enough time to watch everyone, so I think a lot of people, like me, only ever watched a handful of these producers at most. Also because a lot of people's content felt derivative of Doug's, and most of them were just flat out boring, but still. I don't know who roughly 70% of these people are, and I never did. I still don't, so my interpretation of their online personalities is based only on what Doug wrote for them to serve his quote-unquote story. Surprise, surprise, Doug isn't a great writer, so I kind of hate everyone. Also, they're not even characters, they're just the same people they are when they make movie review videos. And maybe if I knew or liked their content, I'd be more inclined to cut them some slack on being so bad at acting. I feel kind of bad about blaming the reviewers for this because they're not actors, but Doug Walker also isn't a director, and here we are. The worst offenders in this regard are Film Brain and Spoonie, who both act so over the top it's hard to tell if they're doing a bad job intentionally, but I don't know what would motivate that.
Oh boy, I'm excited! Are you excited? I'm excited! Excited! Try? There is no try! There is only the darkness.
The performances all have this air of desperation to them, which probably comes from the fact that all these people have very different comedic styles and tones, and they're trying to match that nostalgia critic energy, which, side note, gets old very fast. And again, internet people from 2010 made this, so I know what to expect. But seeing something this amateurish, this lazy, and this uncreative when you spend all your time making fun of movies tells you a lot about Doug Walker. And the fact that he's only slightly progressed past this a decade later tells you a lot more. On top of that, there's never really the feeling that this isn't the Doug Walker show, no matter how big the parts for other producers are. It's very much his project, and from the writing to the directing to the jokes, and especially to the self-indulgent references, Doug uses his fellow producers as props more than collaborators. And that's a shame, because I think if all these people had pooled their ideas ideas, especially Lindsay Ellis, they may have come up with something really interesting. Or maybe I'd just like to think that because it would mean I'd be able to watch something more entertaining, which is a very low bar to overcome. If I were to sum up Kickassia in one word, it would be cute. It's really cute that all these adults got dressed up and filmed a movie in the desert to celebrate 2 years of complaining about movies online. It's adorable, like the Puppy Olympics. It's harmless. And since it's not really trying to be anything more, I can't hold that much against it. I mean, I'm sure they had fun making it and walked away with nothing but good memories and hope for the future, right? Uh-oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we had to get to this sooner or later. In 2018, a bunch of former Channel Awesome producers released a document recounting their experiences with the management of the site. It's not exactly a fun read, as they relay numerous stories of abuse, neglect, and incompetence from the people running the site, including Doug, his brother Rob, and Mike Michaud, who remains the CEO of Channel Awesome to this day. I put a link to the document in this video's description, and I'm not going to recap everything in it here because it's been well covered by people since it was released, but it does factor into these movies frequently and in ways that you can't really ignore when discussing them. Because, as I'm sure you can imagine, that abuse, neglect, and incompetence seeped into their productions as well. Most notably with Kickassia, on the first day of filming, it was discovered that there was no plan for craft services, and this idea was laughed at when it was raised. That means no food or water for a crew of roughly 30 people in the desert who were also, fun fact, not paid for their time and work. On top of that, any revenue from crossover videos that were filmed during production, and there were quite a few, was also taken away from the producers to recoup what was spent to make Kickassia. No other producers besides Doug got a monetary piece of DVDs for this or the other movies either, which had to feel awesome. To be fair though, they got exposure, which we all know is the most valuable currency of all. The more of this document you read, the more it seems like Kickassia was the beginning of the erosion of goodwill that would eventually lead to many of Channel Awesome's most popular producers leaving the site. You know, the ones who didn't have to be fired to avoid bad PR, or others. And as a glimpse into the psyche of Doug Walker, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and it's all downhill from here because the next anniversary sunk even lower. 1 year after the paradigm-shifting film Kickassia, Doug Walker brought his now expanded crew of reviewers back together to film a sequel, Suburban Nights. This movie immediately has much less going for it because when you compare the runtimes, you notice that it's about 40 minutes longer than Kickassia, and your first thought should be, I hope they justify that length. Suburban Nights taught me not to hope. To be fair, this movie is shot better than its predecessor, but I'm willing to credit that to it just being filmed with a better, newer camera. It still rarely looks any better than your average YouTube sketch. Also, the audio is absolute garbage.
But what does it matter? Even if it is worth a bundle, we have no idea where it is or how to find it.
The whole movie sounds like that. It's like listening to a spaghetti western through a busted car speaker. So, the plot of Suburban Nights is that long ago, a feud between sorcerers resulted in the source of all magic being lost, so technology and science flourished as the world developed. The nostalgia critic assembles his fellow reviewers to follow a treasure map he found that supposedly leads to this source, while an ancient, evil sorcerer follows them, determined to reclaim his lost power. Honestly, not a bad setup. Kind of a good idea for a movie. The only problem is everything else. The rest of the movie involves the reviewers facing a series of obstacles and eventually realizing that the sorcerer has been using them to find the source the whole time. In the final battle, it's revealed that Mati from Captain Planet holds the power to defeat the sorcerer, but he dies in the process, and yes, I'll explain that. Ultimately, like Kickassia, this is less a movie and more a collection of bits, but the distinct laziness of Suburban Nights' comedy really makes it drag. I think that 40-minute difference in runtime just came about through pointless empty movie references. See, every reviewer dresses up as a famous character from a well-known fantasy or adventure movie, except Doug, who's the only one dressed up as a video game character for some reason. And they all have to act like those characters the whole time, which means they have to quote those characters and do impressions of those characters almost the whole time. And with this kind of acting talent, there's no way it can go wrong, right? The worst offender in this regard is Angry Joe, who makes the same tired joke over and over and over again.
Hello, my name is not Joe. It is Inigo Montoya. You killed my brother. Father.
Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my mother.
Father.
Somebody! Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my hamster. Father.
Now that I think about it, a lot of Doug Walker's jokes are structured like that. A character will say a line from a movie but change a couple of words, and the joke is, wow, that's just like that famous line from that famous movie, but he said a curse word instead. I also can't tell if a lot of these jokes are just badly written or if the reviewers are referencing their running jokes from their own videos and I just don't get it. Or maybe it's just Doug's interpretation of their running jokes, because I doubt he paid much attention to their videos. The problem is, I never watched most of these people's videos because the charisma they exhibit here is about equal to what they exhibit in those videos, so I'd rather watch anything else. But it feels like a lot of this movie is predicated on a more intimate knowledge of these people, their personalities, their likes and dislikes, and their quote-unquote characters, and I resent it when movies make me do homework. Either way, Doug really leans into referencing his own videos here, and if I hadn't been so into his videos as a teenager, I wouldn't know what was happening half the time. For example, one of the producers, Paw, is dressed up as Jeremy Irons' character Profion from the Dungeons and Dragons movie, referencing that one line from the movie that Doug made fun of in his review.
Good. I can use every ounce of your rage.
Paw says this in almost every line throughout the entirety of Suburban Nights. An entire character is devoted to referencing one joke from one of Doug's videos, a joke that amounts to, Jeremy Irons delivered that line weird. As you wrap your head around that, think about the ego that thought it up. To reinforce that point, there's the fact that Mati is a character in this movie at all, which is a reference to Doug's review of Captain Planet. The joke was, he said that Hart was kind of a lame power to embody compared to what the other kids got, and one of his friends dressed up as Mati and cursed a lot because cartoon characters don't curse, and that's what comedy on YouTube just was for a while. But here, Mati ends up being both the twist reveal hero and the emotional core of the movie, which is bold, frankly, considering that this is again referencing one joke from one video. And if you want to correct me and say he was actually a running joke or whatever, think about what you're defending. Honestly, it's bold that they tried to have an emotional core at all, since the story constantly pauses for 20 minutes of dumb jokes and then resumes like nothing happened. The whiplash you get from these moments is funny at first, but gets increasingly annoying as it goes on.
And how come whenever I hit a chicken, a bajillion other chickens come flying at me? I mean, what the hell? Are they just hiding somewhere? Do they have a secret club? I mean, for God's sakes, if I find the magical bastard who started that chain letter, I give him a... It's malachite.
And that's the fundamental narrative problem with these movies, the fact that the narrative feels like an afterthought. Look, if Doug Walker actually cared about filmmaking, he would have written a story that had a purpose or a theme. Instead, it seems like the only way he knows how to engage with art is to reference it, and that might have been tolerable if the references weren't so surface level. Once the story is set up, there's about 15 minutes devoted to introducing everyone in their costumes, and it just goes on and 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 on. I've never even seen some of the movies they're referencing, but I'm expected to have at least seen all of them, all of Doug's reviews involving them, plus any other related reviews other producers might have made, or even just random movies Doug likes, to even understand why they're acting the way they are or what they're talking about. Like I said, I resent it when movies make me do homework, and all of that is a lot to ask when all you're offering me in return is Suburban Nights. There's a smugness to these references that I find really repugnant too. I think the jokes are supposed to feel clever, but mostly I was just wondering why they were taking all these pot shots at much better movies. The jokes are all harmless and unfunny, of course, but the fact that they sort of review these movies in dialogue, and it comes from this perspective where it feels like they think they're smarter than those movies, it's just so lame and cringy.
Hey! Right, nostalgia chick.
Yeah, I've never seen someone over-romanticize a bunch of nothing so well.
I guess I'm glad Suburban Nights attempted to have a plot more often than Kickassia did, but it was held back by abysmal pacing. That slow, meandering pace never changes. This movie just drags on through unfunny set piece after unfunny set piece. To give you an idea of how painful that is, here's the average length and tone of a joke in Suburban Nights.
Oh, we're supposed to be scared of the good witch of the woods?
If you could, yes.
All right, Kiki, this is good witch of the woods. Oh, who's a good witch? Oh, you're a good witch. Oh, who's a good witch? Oh, you're a good witch.
You're such a good witch. You're such a good witch. Oh, you're such a good witch.
Okay, all right.
Who's a good witch? Oh, who's a good witch?
Am I dead yet? To be fair, not everything in this movie is completely terrible. My king, Todd in the Shadows, hits his lines pretty well, James Rolfe's cameo is pretty funny, and everyone seems to be having a good time at least. But the increased effort in story, scale, and effects just makes the overall failure more resounding. I feel bad for the people who had to act in this. I feel bad for the crew members. I feel bad for the pedestrians who had to witness it. Imagine you're driving home from work and you see this happening in your neighborhood. How quickly do you move to protect your children? And because this movie drags on for what feels like an eternity, I just found myself asking more questions. How many dick jokes does one movie really need? Did we really need to see Doug Walker's crotch? Did they really need to leave this joke in?
Is she alright?
I don't know.
Maybe she needs mouth to mouth.
Hey! That's my job.
You've gotta love that 2011 film bro misogyny. It ages like a fine wine. Also, and I don't think this is an unfair criticism, do these people know how to use a camera? Do they know how to set exposure? Or that you should use different focal lengths for different shots? Or that you should keep things in focus? On pretty much every level, this movie is a step down from Kickassia, and while I can see myself watching that movie for some sort of nostalgic comfort food, Suburban Nights just feels like a chore to watch. And if you were wondering, the production went even worse this time. Turns out I was right about these people having to work with an unfamiliar comedic style, because Doug would apparently direct producers to deliver lines, quote, more like him. And if they didn't deliver the line that way, he would say, quote, we'll do it both ways, so he could just use the take he liked in the edit. A regular Stanley Kubrick. Also, on a project of this scale, they had to be talked into using more than one camera, and since they never accounted for that, extra and crew roles were moved around. This moving around resulted in one of the former crew being injured when a stunt went wrong, and one of her knees being bashed in. But before she was given any medical attention, she was told to sign a form stating that Channel Awesome wasn't liable. Hey Doug, a little tip here from someone who's never had a real job for longer than a month. Usually people sign those before they're injured. That was just one of 4 injuries that were incurred during production, which implies a level of unprofessionalism that you might expect from Doug, who started directing pedestrians that were walking by the places he was filming in, yes, without permits. And again, the very idea of providing craft services was apparently laughed off. But despite all of that, the producers decided to push forward and complete filming. And even through the painful boredom of Suburban Nights, there's a sense of camaraderie shining through. I still get the feeling that everyone wanted to see this come together. But that can only get you so far, because most movies have that feeling, and the brief glimpses at an actual plot make it all the more frustrating when Mati shows back up and starts being loud because comedy. I can see what Doug Walker is going for here, but since this movie seems to be earnestly telling a story and sarcastically laughing at the idea of investment in that story at the same time, I don't know what to think, except God, how did I watch this so many times in high school? I would not recommend Suburban Nights, even as a hate watch. Its brief moments of ironic hilarity are not worth the endless minutes of nothingness it takes to get there. At this point, my only question was, could it possibly get worse? Oh yes, it could. And for the final entry in this trilogy, that camaraderie was gone. So guys, that's part 1 of my look back at the Channel Awesome trilogy in all of its existence. Thanks very much for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more. I'll see you in part 2.